The dinner was still hot when my whole family voted me out of my own life by text. My mother wrote that it was best if I stepped away. So I replied with 8 polite words and then shut down the money that kept them breathing. By sunrise, I had over 90 missed calls and a voicemail that sounded like a man drowning. I realized too late that the only way to stop being their fixer was to stop being their oxygen. My name is Addison Bishop, and I am 34 years old. Though on days like this, I feel archaic. The elevator ride up to my apartment on the 32nd floor always feels like a decompression chamber, a necessary airlock between the pressurized brutality of my job at Haraway and Finch Advisory and the silence of my own home. I had spent 12 hours staring at spreadsheets that detailed the slow, agonizing liquidation of a mid-sized logistics firm in Ohio, telling grown men that their pensions were gone and their futures were now statistical errors. I was good at it. I was the person you brought in when you needed someone to deliver the bad news without blinking. I was the fixer. I was the stable one. I unlocked my door and kicked off my heels. The pain in my arches, a dull, throbbing reminder of the day. I carried a bag of lukewarm Thai takeout that I had bought near the office and had no intention of plating. I set the container on the granite island of my kitchen, the only room in my apartment that looked truly lived in. Mostly because it was where I managed my second full-time job. I cracked open my laptop, the screen glowing blue in the dim light, ready to check the market close, when my personal phone buzzed against the countertop. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration. Not a call, a notification. I glanced down. It was the family group chat. A thread named Bishop Family Updates that usually consisted of photos of my nieces, passive-aggressive requests for money disguised as medical updates, or guilt trips about why I had not visited in 6 months. I picked up the phone. The message was from my mother, Marianne. It was not a photo. It was a paragraph. I read it once. The words swam slightly, refusing to coalesce into meaning. I blinked, took a breath, and read it again. We have talked, and we think it is best if you step away for now. Brielle needs space. We all do. Your judgment is making things harder than they need to be, and for the sake of the family's healing, we are asking you to remove yourself from the group discussions and family decisions for the foreseeable future. Please respect this. I stood there, the smell of cold pad thai filling the air, and felt the blood drain out of my face. It was surgical. It was precise. It was written in the therapy speak my mother had picked up from the expensive counselors I paid for. Then came the reactions. They piled on instantly, like a firing squad that had been waiting for the signal. Aunt Tessa, a woman who had not held a steady job since the Reagan administration, but always had opinions on my spending, reacted with a thumbs-up emoji. Uncle Ray, who I had bailed out of a gambling debt 3 years ago to keep his kneecaps intact, wrote 3 words, hard but necessary. I waited. I watched the 3 dots dance at the bottom of the screen, indicating someone was typing. I waited for my father, Gordon, my dad, the man who used to call me his little calculator, the man whose pride was so fragile I had spent a decade walking on eggshells around it to keep it from shattering. The dots disappeared. He wrote nothing. His silence landed like a verdict. It was louder than any scream. He had seen the message. He had seen the thumbs up from his sister-in-law. He had seen the condemnation of the daughter who paid his mortgage, and he had chosen to look away. I read the message a 3rd time. My body refused to believe it. My brain was trying to process the logic. Step away. Brielle needs space, Brielle, my younger sister, who was currently living in a condo I subsidized, driving a car I leased, and attending a wellness retreat I had funded because she was finding herself. They wanted me to step away. They wanted the distance. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not heartbreak. Heartbreak is hot. It burns. This was cold. It was the feeling of a contract being voided. It was the feeling of a liability being removed from a balance sheet. I did not type a paragraph back. I did not remind them that the decisions they wanted me to step away from were usually decisions about how to spend my money. I did not scream that I was the only reason they had a group chat to begin with, considering I paid for the data plans for 3 of the 5 people in the thread. I typed 8 calm words. Understood. I will step away. Take care. I hit send. I watched the message deliver. Read by everyone. No one replied. No, we love you. No, this is just for a little while. Just the silence of a door closing and locking from the inside. I put the phone down face down on the counter. I did not eat the Thai food. I walked into my bedroom, stripped out of my suit, and put on an oversized t-shirt. I crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling. The silence in the apartment was usually a comfort, but tonight it felt heavy, like the air before a tornado. I lay there for hours. Midnight came and went. 1 in the morning passed. 2 in the morning. My heart was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm. I was not crying. That was the thing that surprised me the most. I was not crying. I was thinking. I was calculating. My mind, trained by years of risk assessment and crisis management, was running the numbers. They wanted me to step away. They wanted space. They claimed my judgment was the problem. My judgment. The same judgment that had navigated them through bankruptcy, foreclosure scares, and medical emergencies. At 2:41 in the morning, I sat up in bed. My heart was oddly calm. The confusion had evaporated, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like ice water. I got out of bed and walked back to the kitchen. I opened my laptop again. I logged into my primary banking portal. The screen populated with numbers, clean and black on a white background. I navigated to the sub-accounts. There it was. The Bishop Family Support Fund. I had created it 5 years ago. It was supposed to be a temporary structure, a way to keep their chaotic needs from bleeding into my personal savings. It was a holding tank where I deposited a fixed percentage of my salary every month to cover the essentials. It was the account linked to the auto drafts. It was the account linked to the debit cards I had given my mother and Brielle for groceries and emergencies. I looked at the scheduled transfer. It was set to execute at 6 in the morning, as it did on the first of every month. $4,500. That was the baseline. That covered the mortgage on my parents' house in Jersey. It covered Brielle's car payment. It covered the supplemental health insurance for my mother. It covered the cell phone family plan. It covered the minimum payments on my father's consolidated credit card debt. $4,500 every month, like clockwork, like oxygen. I stared at the number. I thought about the text message. We think it is best if you step away. If I was stepping away, I needed to step away completely. I needed to honor their request. To do anything else would be disrespectful. To continue managing their finances, to continue acting as their safety net, would be a violation of the boundary they had just set. They wanted autonomy. They wanted space. I clicked on the transfer. Select action, cancel. Are you sure? Yes. The line item disappeared. I was not done. I looked at the current balance in the support fund. There was about $12,000 sitting there, a buffer I kept for the inevitable, unexpected crises that happened every 6 weeks. A transmission blowing out, a roof leak, a manic episode that required retail therapy. I clicked Transfer Funds, Source Bishop Family Support Fund, Destination Addison Personal Savings, High Yield, Amount, All Available Funds. I hit Submit. The money vanished from the family account and reappeared in my own. Safe behind a firewall they could not touch. I was still not done. I navigated to the External Transfers and Linked Accounts tab. This was the lifeline. This was the plumbing that connected my wallet to their lives. I saw the recurring payments set up for the utilities, the auto pay for the insurance, the standing order for the pharmacy. I selected all, delete, delete, delete. I worked with the efficiency of a coroner. I did not hesitate. I did not second guess. I felt a strange, detached fascination with the process. It was so easy. It took years to build a life, to build a safety net, to weave a family together with dollars and cents. It took less than 5 minutes to cut the ropes. Finally, I went to the account settings for the support fund itself. Close account. The bank's software prompted me with a warning. Closing this account will decline all pending transactions and reject any incoming debit requests. This action cannot be undone immediately. Are you sure you want to proceed? I thought about Aunt Tessa's thumbs up. I thought about Uncle Ray calling it hard but necessary. I thought about my father's silence. I clicked confirm. The screen refreshed. The account was gone. I sat there in the blue light of the screen. It was 2:55 in the morning. I closed the laptop. I walked back to bed. And for the first time in 5 years, I slept without grinding my teeth. I woke up at sunrise, not to an alarm, but to the sound of my phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. It had fallen onto the hardwood floor and was buzzing against the wood like a trapped insect. I rolled over and looked at the clock. 6:32 in the morning. The transfer would have normally hit their accounts 30 minutes ago. I picked up the phone from the floor. The screen was full. 12 missed calls from Mom. 7 missed calls from Dad. 5 missed calls from Brielle. 3 texts from Aunt Tessa. I unlocked the screen and the notifications cascaded down like a waterfall of panic. Addison, the mortgage payment didn't go through. The bank just sent an alert. What is going on? Addie, pick up. The pharmacy says the card on file was declined. I need my refill. Did you change the password to the account? I can't see the balance. Addison, this isn't funny. Call me back immediately. Then, a voicemail from my father. I played it. Addison. His voice sounded tight, breathless. It sounded like a man drowning. Addison, the bank is saying the account is closed. Not empty, closed. The mortgage bounced. They are charging a returned payment fee. You need to fix this. You need to call them right now and tell them it was a mistake. Call me. I listened to the fear in his voice. It was the sound of a man who had forgotten that gravity existed because I had been holding him up for so long. He was not afraid for me. He was not calling to apologize for the text last night. He was calling because the floor had vanished. They did not want distance from my wallet. They just wanted distance from my boundaries. They wanted the fruit, but they did not want to acknowledge the tree. I scrolled through the messages. Brielle had sent a string of question marks, then a frantic, I'm at the gas station and the card isn't working. People are staring at me. Fix it. Fix it. That was my title. That was my identity. The fixer. But I had been fired. They had voted me out. I opened the group chat. The same thread where, less than 12 hours ago, they had told me I was the problem. The thread where they had demanded space. I typed one sentence. I am honoring your decision. I sent it. Then I went to the settings of my phone. I turned on Do Not Disturb. I filtered the contacts so that only my office and my assistant could get through. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand. The sun was coming through the blinds, painting stripes of golden light across the duvet. The city outside was waking up. The horns were starting to blare on the avenue below. The world was moving forward. I took a deep breath. The air tasted different. It tasted thin, sharp, and terrifyingly free. This is where my life starts again, I whispered to the empty room. And I meant it. They had asked for space. I was going to give them a galaxy of it. You do not wake up one morning and decide to become an emotional bank vault. You are built that way, brick by heavy brick, laid down by people who claim they are just trying to keep the roof from collapsing. I was not born cold. I was not born calculating. 5 years ago, I was actually quite soft. I was the daughter who came home for every birthday, the one who bought the thoughtful gifts, the one who believed that love was a verb that meant showing up. I was trained to be useful. I was groomed to be the stable one, the designated driver of the Bishop family vehicle, even when I was sitting in the back seat. If I look back at the ledger of my life, the red ink started spilling exactly 5 years ago. It did not happen all at once. It was not a tsunami. It was a slow, rising damp that rotted the floorboards before anyone noticed the smell. It started with Brielle. It always starts with Brielle. She was 24 then, vibrating with that specific kind of chaotic potential that everyone in my family mistook for genius. She had moved to Chicago to pursue something vague involving graphic design and an older boyfriend who was a freelance percussionist. I remember the phone call because I was on a date. I was at a wine bar with a man named David, a man I liked very much, a man who looked at me with genuine curiosity. We were laughing about something trivial when my phone lit up. It was Brielle. It was a Tuesday. I excused myself, stepping out into the cool evening air. When I answered, she was not crying. She was hyperventilating. The boyfriend was gone. The rent was 3 months overdue. The landlord was threatening eviction by the weekend. She had nowhere to go, no savings, and she was talking about how dark the world felt, how she did not know if she could handle the shame of coming home. I did what I was trained to do. I did not ask why she had waited 3 months. I did not ask where her paycheck from the coffee shop had gone. I asked how much. $3,200. I told her to breathe. I told her it would be okay. I transferred the money from my savings account while standing on the sidewalk. Watching David through the window as he checked his watch, I told myself it was a one-time thing, a rescue mission. You do not leave your sister on the street. Just until Friday, she had promised, her voice thick with relief. I have a check clearing. I promise, Addie, just until Friday. Friday never came. The check never cleared, but the crisis passed, and the relief in her voice was so intoxicating, so heavy with gratitude, that I felt a strange high. I had fixed it. I was the hero. But heroes have to keep saving people. 3 months later, the ground shifted under my parents. My father, Gordon, had worked in mid-level logistics management for 30 years. He was a man who defined himself by the company car and the annual bonus. Then came the merger, the handshake that was actually a shove. He was let go on a Thursday afternoon with a severance package that was insulting and a handshake that was dismissive. He came home and sat at the kitchen table in his suit, staring at the wall. He told us it was temporary. He told us he had leads. He told us it was actually a blessing because he was finally going to consult. He kept putting on a tie every morning. He kept driving into town to sit in coffee shops and network, but the severance ran out in 6 months. The networking coffees did not turn into contracts. At the same time, my mother, Marianne, began to fade. She had always been fragile, a woman who treated her health like a mystery novel she was afraid to finish reading. She had been managing a heart condition for years. But with Dad's insurance gone, the cost of her medication tripled. I did not know this immediately. I found out the way you find out about a termite infestation when the wall crumbles. I was visiting for the weekend, trying to help Dad with his resume. When Mom collapsed in the kitchen, it was terrifying. The ambulance, the emergency room lights, the beeping monitors. It turned out she had been rationing her pills. She had been cutting them in half, then into quarters, trying to make a 30-day supply last for 90 days because she did not want to worry Gordon about the money. I stood in that hospital hallway, smelling the antiseptic and the stale coffee, and I looked at my parents. Dad looked gray, defeated, his suit jacket hanging off his shoulders like a costume. Mom looked small and frightened in the hospital bed. Brielle was there, crying loudly, making the nurses bring her tissues, making the tragedy about her fear of losing them. I realized then that they were all drowning. They were bobbing in the middle of the ocean, and I was the only one in a boat. I walked down to the billing department. I handed them my credit card, the copay, the deductible, the out-of-pocket costs. It was nearly $8,000. Then I went to the pharmacy and paid for 6 months of her medication in advance. When I came back to the room, I did not tell them the amount. I did not want to shame them. I just said, "It is handled. Do not worry about it." The look on my father's face was a complicated mix of relief and emasculation. He nodded, once, sharp and quick, and looked away. My mother squeezed my hand and said, "You are such a blessing. Addison, God always provides." God, not the 60-hour weeks I worked, not the savings I had been building for a down payment on a house. God provided, and I was just the vessel. That was the moment the Bishop Family Support Fund was truly born, though I did not give it a name until later. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was just bridging the gap until Dad found a new role, until Brielle found her footing. I approached it like a consultant. I analyzed the cash flow. I looked at their burn rate. I realized that asking them for money when they needed it was chaotic and humiliating for them. So, I systematized it. I created a separate checking account. I set up a direct deposit from my paycheck, $1,500 a month at first, then $2,000, then, when Dad's consulting yielded $0 for a year, it went up to $3,000. I told them, "This is for the basics. This is so Mom never has to cut a pill in half again. This is so the lights stay on." It was supposed to be a safety net. But I learned a hard lesson about physics that year. If you put a safety net under people who refuse to climb, they will eventually just lie down in it. The net becomes a hammock. The temporary structure solidified into concrete. The miracle recovery became the status quo. My father stopped wearing the tie every day. He started talking about semi-retirement and how the market was rigged against men his age. My mother stopped worrying about the pharmacy costs because the card I gave her always worked. Brielle moved back home, then out again, then back. Her rent always mysteriously covered by family help, and I began to disappear. The praise at Thanksgiving dinners went to my mother's resilience. "Look how strong Marianne is," the aunts would say. "She bounced back from that scare so well." The praise went to my father's hustle. Even though his hustle was mostly writing angry letters to the editor and managing his fantasy football league, I was just there. I was part of the furniture. I was the thermostat noticed only when I stopped working or when the temperature wasn't right. My own life began to shrink to accommodate theirs. I was making good money, very good money, but I was living like a broke college student. I had been looking at buying a condo in the city, a place with a view and a doorman. I scrapped that. I renewed the lease on my studio apartment, the one with the drafty windows and the radiator that clanked all night. My friends from business school were booking trips to Tulum, to Tokyo, to the Amalfi Coast. "Come with us, Addie," they would say. "You need a break." I would look at the spreadsheet. I would look at the Bishop Family Support Fund balance, if I went to Tokyo, and the furnace broke at my parents' house. I would be short. If I went to Italy, and Brielle totaled her car again, I would be overextended. "I can't this time," I would say. "Work is crazy." I lied. Work was fine. It was my second job being the family matriarch, and safety deposit box that was killing me. I started measuring my joy against a spreadsheet. A nice dinner out for myself was calculated as half of Mom's Lipitor. A new pair of boots was 1 week of Brielle's groceries. Every dollar I spent on myself felt like theft. It felt like I was taking food out of their mouths. I convinced myself this was what love looked like. Love was sacrifice. Love was the hard thing. Love was staying up until midnight reconciling their bank statements because Dad wasn't good with the online stuff. But every time I tried to set a boundary, the reaction was swift and brutal. I remember one Christmas, 2 years into the arrangement, I suggested that perhaps Brielle should get a part-time job to help with her own gas money. Just a suggestion. Gentle. The room went silent. The air pressure dropped. "You are judging us," Brielle snapped, her eyes welling up instantly. "You think because you have this corporate job and no soul that you are better than me? I am an artist, Addison. I am trying to build something real, not just move money around like you." My mother chimed in, her voice soft but laced with disappointment. "Addison, honey, we are all doing our best. You have changed. You have become so transactional. Family isn't a business." "Must be nice," Uncle Ray muttered from the couch. Nursing a beer I had paid for. "Must be nice to have your life so together that you can look down on everyone else." I retreated. I apologized. I wrote a check to smooth it over. That was the cycle. I gave. They took. I spoke. They shamed. I shrank. They expanded. I did not realize it then. But I was not saving them. I was keeping them sick. And in the process, I was slowly bleeding myself dry, dollar by dollar, dream by dream, until the only thing left of Addison Bishop was a bank routing number and a deep, silent resentment that was waiting for a spark to ignite it. By the second year, the arrangement had calcified into a routine that felt less like family support and more like a hostage negotiation. The first of the month was the mortgage and the bills, the fixed costs that I could budget for, but it was the days between the 1st and the 31st that began to erode my nervous system. I developed a Pavlovian response to the vibration of my phone. Every time it buzzed on my desk at work, my stomach would tighten into a cold, hard knot. I stopped associating my phone with communication. I started associating it with cost. I began to notice the timing. It was uncanny. It was almost supernatural. The crises never happened on the 28th of the month, when my own accounts were leanest. They always happened on the 16th or the 17th, exactly 48 hours after my bi-monthly paycheck hit my account. It was as if they had a sensor attached to my direct deposit. The radiator would blow on the 16th. Brielle's car would need a new transmission on the 17th. My father would suddenly remember a tax penalty from 3 years ago on the 18th. I sat in my office late one Tuesday, staring at a text from my mother about a critical dental emergency that required $1,200 immediately. And I felt something shift inside me. It was not anger yet. It was the cold curiosity of a data analyst. Need is supposed to be finite. A hole is filled, and then it is level. But I was pouring water into a bucket that seemed to grow wider the more I poured. The need was expanding to fill the available capital. That night, I did not just wire the money. I opened a new spreadsheet. I did not do it to build a legal case. I did not do it to throw it in their faces. I did it because I was starting to feel insane. I was starting to doubt my own memory. Had I not just paid for dental work in February? Had we not replaced those tires in November? I needed to see it in black and white to prove to myself that I was not hallucinating the hemorrhage of my own life. I named the file the Ledger. I started retroactively entering data from the past 24 months. I pulled up my bank statements, my Venmo history, the Zelle transfer logs. I categorized every single transaction, date, amount, stated reason, recipient. The first thing that hit me was the total. I knew it was high, but seeing the cumulative number in a bold, sans serif font made the air leave the room. In 2 years, I had transferred $72,450. I sat back in my chair. The blue light of the laptop illuminating my small, drafty apartment, $72,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a wedding I never had. That was the freedom to quit the job that made me grind my teeth at night. I looked at my own savings account. It had flatlined. I was making more money than I had ever made in my life. Yet my net worth had not moved an inch since the day my father lost his job. I was a high-functioning conduit, channeling wealth from my employer directly to my family, keeping nothing for myself but the stress of management. Then, I started looking closer at the stated reason column versus the reality. I decided to ask for receipts. I told myself it was just good governance. If I was the family's CFO, I needed documentation. The reaction was immediate and visceral. "We are not your employees, Addison," my father snapped when I asked to see the invoice for the car repair. "I am your father. Do you think I am stealing from you? Is that what this is? You think I am a thief? I just want to keep track of the expenses for tax purposes," I lied, trying to keep my voice even. "Stop policing us," Brielle texted. "It is humiliating enough to have to ask. You do not have to make us beg and show paperwork like we are on welfare. You are supposed to be my sister." They made me feel small. They made me feel petty. They weaponized their own shame and fired it at me until I backed down. But I did not stop looking. I just stopped asking. I became a silent observer. I realized that because I paid the credit card bills, I could see the line item details of the spending. I had access to the raw data they thought I was ignoring. I spent a weekend forensic auditing my own family. I found the groceries. There were charges to the local supermarket. Yes, but there were also 3 or 4 charges a week to premium food delivery services. Sushi on a Tuesday night for $80. Thai food on a Thursday for $65. I was eating leftovers. I was meal prepping rice and beans to save money. They were ordering spicy tuna rolls on my dime because they were too stressed to cook. I found the essentials. Brielle had needed money for a work laptop because hers had crashed. I saw the transaction at the electronics store. It was for the newest, highest-end model, the one with the maximum memory and the most expensive processor. She was designing flyers for local bands. She did not need a machine capable of rendering Pixar movies. She had bought the best because she wasn't paying for it. Then there were the little treats, the upgrades. My mother's flight to visit Aunt Tessa in Florida. I had paid for economy. I saw a charge for an upgrade to Economy Plus. Then another charge for checked bags that exceeded the weight limit. The streaming services. We had the family plan, but I saw individual subscriptions for premium channels, ad-free tiers, music services I didn't even know existed. $10 here, $15 there. It bled out in 1,000 tiny cuts. And then, I found the anomaly. It was a recurring charge on my father's card. It was listed as BRRO membership fee. It was $99 a month. It had been running for 14 months. I searched for it online. Nothing obvious came up. It sounded generic. Bishop Renewal Outreach Brothers of Ray Organization. I couldn't place it. I asked my father about it casually during a call about the electric bill. Hey, Dad, what is this BRO charge I keep seeing it? There was a pause, a beat of silence that lasted 2 seconds too long. Oh, that, he said, his voice dropping into that breezy, dismissive tone he used when he was lying. That is just a networking group. For the consulting, a professional association. It helps me get leads. $1,400 in leads, I asked. Have you gotten any clients from it? It takes time, Addison, he snapped. You do not understand how this industry works. You have to spend money to make money. Stop counting every penny. I did not press him. I let it go. But I did not forget it. I took a screenshot of the charge. I saved it to a folder on my desktop named Receipts. I moved the folder into a hidden subdirectory. I started saving everything, every text message where Brielle threatened self-harm if I didn't send cash, every voicemail where my mother cried about being a burden while simultaneously asking for a higher allowance, every bank statement highlighting the discrepancies between their desperation and their lifestyle. I was building an archive of my own exploitation. Half of me hoped I would never need it. I hoped that one day they would wake up and say, "Thank you, Addison. We are on our feet now. You can stop." But the other half of me, the part that was growing colder and sharper by the day, knew that day would never come. I was saving this for the end. I was saving it for the explosion I knew was inevitable. The most terrifying part was not the anger I felt toward them. It was the change in my own internal voice. For years, my inner monologue had been a loop of guilt. You have so much, and they have so little. You are selfish. You should do more. Now, the voice was changing. It was becoming clinical. It was becoming detached. I looked at a photo Brielle posted on social media, a picture of her mental health day at a spa, holding a glass of cucumber water, wearing a robe I knew cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I did not feel happy for her. I did not feel guilty that I was at work while she was relaxing. I felt clarity. I realized that I was not a savior. I was a resource. I was a natural resource that they were mining. They were fracking my life, pumping out every dollar and ounce of energy, and they did not care if they destabilized the bedrock. They did not love me for who I was. They loved the function I performed. I remembered a conversation from a few weeks prior. I had called my mother, just to talk. I had had a bad day. I wanted to tell her about a promotion I was up for, about a project that was difficult. She had listened for 2 minutes, inserting and that's nice at the appropriate intervals. Then, without a segue, she cut me off. That sounds hard. Honey, listen, before I forget, the air conditioning unit is making that rattling noise again. Do you think we could get someone out to look at it before it gets hot? I don't want your father's blood pressure going up. She didn't hear me. She didn't want to hear me. She wanted the air conditioner fixed. I sat in my apartment. the glow of the spreadsheet illuminating my face, and the realization finally fully formed. It was sharp enough to cut glass. They do not want help. Help implies a temporary state. Help implies a goal of independence. They do not want to be helped. They want access. They want access to my lifestyle without the labor. They want access to my security without the sacrifice. They want the benefits of my life without having to live it. And the only thing standing between them and total consumption of my existence was my ability to say yes. I closed the laptop. I did not cry. I did not call them. I sat in the dark and listened to the city breathe. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think the forbidden thought. What would happen if I just stopped, not a pause, not a negotiation, a full stop? The thought was terrifying. It felt like considering murder. But as I sat there, tracing the scar on my mahogany desk with my fingernail, the terror began to recede, replaced by a strange, dark anticipation. I knew the break was coming. I didn't know when, and I didn't know how. But the ledger had shown me the truth. The math didn't work. The equation was unbalanced. And in my line of work, when the equation is unbalanced, you don't keep adding zeros, you close the account. It was an ordinary Tuesday when the final fracture happened. The kind of Tuesday that feels like it is wrapped in gray wool. The sky outside my office window was the color of wet pavement, and the air conditioner in the conference room was humming with a low, headache-inducing drone. I was reviewing a restructuring proposal for a failing retail chain when my phone buzzed. It was Brielle. I stared at the screen for a moment. It was 2 p.m. Brielle was usually asleep or at a yoga class at this hour. If she was calling, it meant she had found something she wanted, and she wanted it before she had time to talk herself out of the price tag. I answered. "Hello, Brielle?" "Addie, you have to listen to me," she said, her voice breathless, vibrating with that manic enthusiasm that always preceded a financial disaster. "I found it. I finally found it. It is perfect. It is not just an apartment, Addie. It is a creative sanctuary." I took off my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. "You already have an apartment. Brielle, we just renewed the lease on the condo 6 months ago. I paid the deposit." "The condo is stifling me," she said, dismissing 6 months of rent payments with a wave of her voice. "The energy is wrong. I cannot create there. But this new place, it is a converted loft in the Arts District. High ceilings, exposed brick, north-facing light. It is a space where I can actually launch my brand. It is mental health. Addie, truly, my therapist agrees that my environment is holding me back." I closed my eyes. There it was, the weaponized therapy language. "How much is it?" I asked. "It is $3,400 a month," she said, rushing the numbers together so they would sound smaller. "But listen, the landlord loves me. He says I have great energy. He just needs a cosigner because my credit score is still repairing itself from that mix-up with the student loans. If you cosign today, I can move in on the first. $3,400. That was more than my mortgage. That was more than the salary of the junior analyst sitting outside my glass door." "No," I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of shock. The machine had malfunctioned. The ATM had refused the card. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave, losing its breathless shine. I said no. "Brielle, I am not co-signing a lease for $3,400. You have a perfectly good apartment. If you want to move, you need to qualify for the lease on your own. I am not doing this anymore." "You are joking," she said. "You know I cannot qualify on my own. You are basically saying I have to stay in a place that makes me depressed. You are choosing to hurt my mental health. I am choosing not to be liable for $40,000 of rent when you decide you do not like the north-facing light in 3 months," I said. My voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "The answer is no. Brielle, do not ask me again. You are being incredibly selfish," she spat out. "You have no idea what it is like to struggle. You sit in your ivory tower and judge everyone. Dad was right about you." She hung up. I stared at the phone. Dad was right about you. I put the phone down and went back to work. I forced myself to focus on the retail chain's debt-to-income ratio. I forced myself to ignore the sick feeling in my stomach, the familiar dread that whispered, "You are going to pay for this." I did not know how right the voice was. 3 hours later, the group text arrived. I was packing up my laptop when the notification slid onto my screen. It was the message from my mother, the one I read in the cold open of this story, the one that sliced me out of the family like a tumor. "We have talked, and we think it is best if you step away for now." I sat in my office chair, the leather creaking beneath me, and I went very still. I finally understood the timeline. I understood the mechanics of the afternoon. After I said no to Brielle, she had called Mom. She had called Dad. She had spun a narrative of cruelty and abandonment. She had probably told them I screamed at her, that I mocked her mental health, that I dangled my money over her head like a master taunting a dog. And they had convened a tribunal. They had likely started a separate group chat one without me where they discussed my toxicity. My father, who was driving a car I paid for, would have said, "She has become impossible to talk to." My mother, whose pharmacy bills were on autopay from my account, would have sighed and said, "She just doesn't understand family loyalty." Aunt Tessa would have chimed in from the sidelines. Fueling the fire, they had voted. The verdict was exile, but here was the catch: they did not want to exile me from the support. They wanted to exile me from the authority. They wanted to push me away just enough so that I could not say no to the next lease, but keep me close enough that the auto transfers would keep clearing. They wanted to punish the boundary I had set with Brielle. They wanted to teach me a lesson: if you try to control how we spend your money, we will cut you off emotionally until you fall back in line. It was a tactic. It was a strategy. Step away meant, sit in the corner and think about what you did, but leave your wallet on the table. I typed my 8 words. "Understood. I will step away. Take care." I drove home in silence. I did not listen to a podcast. I did not listen to music. I listened to the tires on the asphalt. When I got to my apartment, I did not explode. I did not throw a vase against the wall. I did not drink a bottle of wine. I lay on my couch and stared at the ceiling fans spinning slowly above me. I felt a weird, hollow grief. It wasn't the grief of losing people. It was the grief of losing an illusion. I had spent 5 years believing that if I was useful enough, I would be loved. I thought that my utility was a currency that I could trade for affection. I realize now that utility is not a currency. It is a commodity, and commodities are used up, discarded, and replaced. They did not miss me. They missed the version of me that said yes. I closed my eyes and imagined the next few months if I did nothing, if I just stepped away emotionally but left the financial plumbing intact. Brielle would get the apartment. Mom or Dad would co-sign, knowing that if they defaulted, I would swoop in to save their credit score. They would wait 2 weeks, then send a tentative text. "Hope you are doing better. We miss you." And I would come back, grateful for the crumbs, and the cycle would reset. The price of re-entry would be the security deposit on the loft. No. My eyes snapped open. I remembered the date. It was the last day of the month. The big transfer, the $4,500 life support injection, was scheduled for 6 in the morning. If I was stepping away, I had to step away. You cannot fire the employee but keep their keycard active. You cannot divorce the wife but keep coming over for dinner. Stepping away could not be symbolic. It had to be literal. I got up and walked to my laptop. The house was dark. The only light came from the city skyline outside and the glow of the screen. I logged into the bank. I have described the mechanics of closing the account already. The clicks, the transfers, the sterile efficiency of it. But what I did not describe was the feeling in my chest as I did it. It felt like cutting a rope while hanging off a cliff, not knowing if the ground below was 5 feet down or 500. I hovered the mouse over the final confirm button to close the Bishop Family Support Fund. I hesitated for exactly 1 second. A flash of my mother's face appeared in my mind, not the manipulative woman who sent the text, but the mother who used to make me soup when I was sick. A flash of my father teaching me to ride a bike. Then I remembered the silence. I remembered the thumbs up from Aunt Tessa. I remembered Brielle saying, "Dad was right about you." I clicked the button. There was no dramatic speech. I did not send a warning text saying, "If you do this, I am cutting you off." Warning them would have been a mistake. Warning them would have been an invitation to negotiate. If I had told them I was closing the account, they would have called. They would have screamed. They would have cried. They would have promised to change. They would have said anything to keep the line open. And I might have believed them. So I did it in the dark. I did it while they slept. I did it because I was done being negotiated with when I wasn't even allowed in the room. I went to sleep with the strange, heavy certainty of a soldier burning a bridge behind them. Morning came, and with it, the detonation. I woke up to the missed calls, the panic I described earlier, but now, reading the texts in the cold light of day, I saw the truth of them. They were not worried about me. They were not asking, "Addison, are you okay? Why did you do this?" They were asking about the mechanism. The payment bounced. The card is declined. The account is gone. They were technical support tickets, not family inquiries. Then came Brielle. Her messages started at 7 in the morning with confusion. "Addie, the gas pump isn't working. Did you freeze the card?" By 8 in the morning, the tone had shifted. The panic had turned into rage. The narrative had flipped. "You did this on purpose," she wrote. A wall of blue text bubbles filled my screen. "You knew I needed gas to get to the meeting with the landlord. You are sabotaging me." Sabotage. She did not see the 5 years of rent I had paid. She did not see the car I had leased for her. She saw the one moment I stopped, and she defined my entire existence by that one refusal. "You are punishing us just because we asked for space," she texted. "That is so abusive. Addison, financial abuse is real. You are trying to control us by starving us out. How could you be so cruel? Mom is crying. I hope you are happy." I read the words financial abuse and almost laughed. A dry, sharp sound that startled me in the quiet apartment. I was the one who had been drained. I was the one whose savings were stagnant. I was the one working 60-hour weeks to fund their mental health breaks. And yet, in their story, I was the villain. I was the abuser because I had stopped allowing them to abuse me. I started to type a reply. I started to type, "I am not punishing you. You asked me to step away. I stepped away. This is what it looks like when I am not there." I stopped. My thumb hovered over the letters. What was the point if I explained it? They would just argue. They would twist the logic. They would say, "We didn't mean the money. We meant your attitude." They would gaslight me until I apologized for their lack of gratitude. I deleted the draft. I realized then that you cannot explain your side of the story to people who need you to be the villain so they can be the victim. They were committed to misunderstanding me because understanding me would require them to look at themselves. I made a new rule in that moment. Standing in my kitchen with a cup of black coffee in my hand. No more explaining. I would not justify. I would not defend. I would not provide receipts to prove I was good. I sent the single message, "I am honoring your decision." Then I put the phone face down. Brielle sent one more text that popped up on my watch. A final parting shot before I blocked the notifications. "You are going to regret this. You need us more than we need you." I looked at my silent apartment. I looked at the bank app on my phone, where my money was finally sitting still, safe and untouched. "No, Brielle," I said to the empty air. "I really don't." 3 days of silence is a long time for a family that communicates exclusively in crises. For 72 hours. My phone had been a paperweight, barring the occasional notification from work. I had expected the rage to last longer, or perhaps for the silence to stretch into a permanent Cold War. But I had underestimated their desperation. On Friday afternoon, a text arrived from my mother. It was not hysterical, it was not demanding, it was deceptively soft. Addison, we cannot leave things like this. We are a family. Please, join us for a video call tonight. Just 10 minutes. We want to clear the air. We want to understand. I stared at the message. The logical part of my brain, the part that had built the ledger and closed the accounts, screamed that it was a trap. It warned me that clearing the air was a euphemism for wearing you down. But the other part of me, the vestigial part that still remembered being 6 years old and wanting my mother to be proud of a drawing, hesitated. I wanted them to understand. I wanted, with a pathetic, aching hope, for them to say, "We see what we did. We are sorry." I texted back, 8 o'clock, 10 minutes. I spent the rest of the evening preparing. I did not prepare like a daughter going to a family meeting. I prepared like a defendant going to a deposition. I showered, put on a blazer, and poured a glass of water. I sat at my desk, not on the couch. I wanted the barrier of the screen and the structure of my workspace. At 7:59, I clicked the link. The screen flickered. The connection stabilized, and my stomach dropped through the floor. I had expected my mother and father, maybe Brielle. Instead, a grid of 6 faces stared back at me. It was a tribunal. My parents were sitting on the beige sofa in the living room I paid for. Brielle was in her condo, her face blotchy and red, looking like a tragedy painted by an amateur. But they were not alone. Aunt Tessa was there, dialed in from her kitchen, clutching a glass of wine like a gavel. Uncle Ray was in the bottom corner, looking uncomfortable in a recliner. Even my cousin Denise, whom I had not spoken to since Christmas 2 years ago, was present, looking solemnly at the camera as if she were witnessing a sentencing hearing. They had gathered the clan. They had brought witnesses. This was not a conversation. It was an ambush. "Hello, Addison," my mother said. Her voice was trembling, but her eyes were hard. "Thank you for joining us. We thought it was important for everyone to be here, because this affects everyone." "Affects everyone?" I asked, my voice calm, though my pulse was thundering in my ears. "How does my personal bank account affect Denise?" "This is not about money, Addison," Aunt Tessa chimed in, her voice shrill and distorted by the microphone. "This is about character. We are shocked. We are all just shocked." "We are not here to attack you," my father said, raising a hand to silence Tessa. He looked tired. He looked old. He looked at me with the weary disappointment of a CEO whose subordinate had failed a critical task. "We are here to help you understand the gravity of what you have done. You have put this family in a very dangerous position." "I put you in a dangerous position," I repeated. "You asked me to step away? I stepped away." "You abandoned us," Brielle screamed. The audio peaked, distorting her voice into a digital screech. "You cut us off without warning. You knew I had bills due. You knew Mom needed her prescription. You pulled the rug out because your feelings were hurt. That is not stepping away. Addison, that is violence. That is financial abuse." There was that word again. Abuse. "It is cruel," my mother added, wiping a tear that I was 90% sure was real and 100% weaponized. "To leave your parents wondering if they can keep the lights on after everything we sacrificed for you, we raised you to be better than this." "We are worried about you," Uncle Ray grumbled. "A person who can do this to their own blood. It is not right. It is cold. It is like you are a robot." They took turns. It was a firing squad, and I was tied to the post. They threw words at me like stones. Selfish, arrogant, vindictive, unstable. They spun a narrative where I was a monster who had lured them into dependency only to punish them for sport. They erased 5 years of sacrifice and replaced it with 3 days of inconvenience. I let them talk. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the desk, my face a mask of polite interest. I let them run out of breath. I let the anger burn itself out until there was only the heavy, panting silence of a group that expects their victim to break. They were waiting for me to cry. They were waiting for me to apologize. They were waiting for me to say, "I am sorry. I was just so hurt. I will fix it right now." My father leaned into the camera. "Addison," he said, his voice dropping to a serious paternal baritone. "We are willing to move past this. We can forgive this outburst. But you need to fix this. Now, open the account back up. Transfer the funds, and we can discuss a more structured way for you to participate in the family. But you have to fix it tonight." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had let me pay his mortgage for 5 years while he played at being a consultant. "Are you finished?" I asked. The question hung in the air, cool and sharp. "Excuse me," Aunt Tessa said. "I asked if you were finished," I said. "Because you have had your say. You have called me abusive, cruel, and cold. Now, I would like to show you something." I did not wait for permission. I clicked the share screen button. I selected the window containing the spreadsheet, the ledger. My face shrank to a small box in the corner of their screens, replaced by the stark white glare of the Excel file. "What is this?" Brielle asked, squinting. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the last 5 years." I started to scroll. I did not scroll fast. I scrolled with the slow, methodical pace of a credit sequence. Row 1, November 21st. Rent assistance for Brielle, $3,200. Row 2, December 4th. Medical deductible for mom, $850. Row 3, January 10th. Car repair for dad, $1,400. "Addison, stop this," my mother said, her voice rising in panic. "We do not need to see this." "I think you do," I said. "You called me abusive. You said I abandoned you. I want to be clear about what exactly I abandoned." I kept scrolling. The dates flew by. The amounts blurred. But the sheer volume of data was undeniable. April 15th, tax penalty payment, $2,000. June 3rd, emergency trip to Florida, $600. August 22nd, BRO, membership fee, $99. August 22nd, sushi delivery, $84. August 23rd, Sephora, $112. "Why do you have all this?" Uncle Ray asked, sounding suddenly sober. "Because I paid for it," I said. "Every single line, every single cent." I highlighted a section from 2 years ago. "Here is where you told me you were rationing medication. Mom, I sent $3,000, but looking here, 2 days later, there is a charge for a weekend stay at a casino resort in Atlantic City on the card I pay off. $350 for the room, $400 for dining." "That was for your father's stress," my mother cried. "He needed a break." "And here," I continued, ignoring her, "Brielle's work laptop, $2,800, followed a week later by a charge for concert tickets in Chicago, $400. "You are violating my privacy," Brielle shrieked. "It is not privacy when it is my bank account," I said. I scrolled to the bottom. I let the rows fly by thousands of lines of coffee runs, gas fill-ups, clothes, electronics, mistakes, cleanups, bailouts. It was a waterfall of my life energy, converted into dollars and consumed by them without a second thought. I reached the bottom row, the total. I highlighted the cell. I zoomed in. "Do you see that number?" I asked. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that happens when a gun goes off in a library. $93,118.44, I read aloud. I enunciated every syllable. "That is the total amount of money I have transferred to this family in 60 months. $93,000. I paused. I let the number sit there. I let it sink into their living rooms and their kitchens. "That is my down payment," I said softly. "That is my retirement. That is 5 years of my life that I went to work every single day, sick or tired, to earn, and I gave it to you. And in return, when I said no to one single request, you told me to step away." My mother was the first to speak. Her voice was a hiss, low and venomous. "So you have been keeping score," she whispered. "This whole time, you pretended to be generous, but you were just keeping a list to throw in our faces. That is sick, Addison. That is not love. She tried to twist the knife. She tried to turn the evidence of her greed into evidence of my malice. I looked at her face on the screen, distorted by the pixelation, and I felt nothing. No guilt. No shame. "No, Mom," I said. "I have not been keeping score. I have been keeping reality, because you kept rewriting it." I stopped sharing the screen. My face filled their monitors again. I saw them clearly now. They looked small. They looked caught. "You rewrote the story so that you were the victims and I was the bottomless pit of money," I said. "But the math does not lie. You did not want a daughter. You wanted a sponsor." "Family helps family," Brielle yelled, desperate to regain the moral high ground, reciting the mantra that had kept me trapped for half a decade. "That is what we do. We help each other. You are punishing us for needing help." I looked at my sister. I looked at the dark circles under her eyes, the desperation that she wore like a scarf. I almost pitied her, but pity is expensive, and I was over budget. "Family helps family," I repeated. I leaned forward, looking directly into the camera lens, making sure they felt me in the room with them. "If family helps family, Brielle, then why did you vote me out of the family before you voted the spending down?" The question landed like a physical blow. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. Aunt Tessa looked away. My mother just stared at me, her mouth a tight line of fury. They had no answer, because the answer was that I was not family. I was staff, and staff does not get to set boundaries. "I am done," I said. "The account stays closed. The cards are canceled. Do not call me about money again." "Addison, wait," my father started, his voice rising in panic. I moved my mouse to the red button. "Good night," I said. I clicked, "Leave meeting." The screen went black. The voices cut off instantly. I sat in the silence of my apartment. My heart was not racing anymore. My hands were not shaking. I looked at the blank screen of my laptop. I felt lighter, $93,000 lighter. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were beautiful tonight. They didn't look like expenses. They looked like stars. If I had thought the silence after the video call was the end of the war, I was naive. It was merely the reload phase. The calls did not stop. They mutated. For the first 48 hours after I hung up on the tribunal, the communication was desperate. It was the frantic flailing of people who realized the ship was actually sinking. But by Monday morning, the desperation had curdled into something far more volatile. It became rage, and when the rage did not yield a bank transfer, it calcified into a terrifying, rigid moral superiority. They stopped asking. They started preaching. My mother, Marianne, spearheaded the psychological offensive. She did not call. She wrote. She sent text messages that were so long they arrived in multiple parts, broken up by the character limit of the cellular network. They were manifestos of martyrdom. "I remember holding you when you were 3 days old," one message began, arriving at 10 in the morning while I was in a client briefing. "I had a fever of 102, but I did not put you down. I nursed you through the pain. I gave up my body for you. I gave up my career for you. And now, because you have a little money, you think you are better than the woman who gave you life. You are spitting on my sacrifice. Addison, God sees this. You can hide your money, but you cannot hide your heart from God." She was rewriting history to turn basic parenting into a transactional debt that I could never repay. She was weaponizing her own biology. Then there was Brielle. Brielle did not write paragraphs. She sent voice notes, long, rambling audio files recorded, judging by the acoustics, from the floor of her bathroom or the inside of her car. I made the mistake of listening to one without headphones in the sanctity of my kitchen. "I can't eat," her voice cracked, sounding wet and thick. "I literally haven't eaten in 2 days because I'm so stressed. My stomach is in knots. I hope you are happy. Addie, I hope your savings account keeps you warm when I'm in the hospital for malnutrition. You are doing this. You are actively hurting me. It is sadistic. Who does that? Who hurts their little sister on purpose?" It was panic weaponized. It was a performance designed to trigger the fixer reflex in my brain. 5 years ago, that voice note would have had me wiring $500 for groceries within minutes. Now, I listened to it like a forensic analyst. I heard the pause where she took a sip of something. I heard the deliberate modulation of her pitch. It was not the sound of someone dying. It was the sound of someone negotiating with a terrorist. Except in her mind, I was the terrorist. Then came the flying monkeys. This is a term I learned from a corporate conflict resolution seminar, referring to the agents a narcissist sends to do their bidding. I started receiving messages on social media from relatives I had not spoken to since I was 12, a second cousin in Ohio, my great-aunt's daughter-in-law, people who did not know my middle name but suddenly had intimate knowledge of my financial responsibilities. "Your father is a good man," a message from Uncle Ray's brother read. "He is suffering. You need to do the right thing. Don't be heartless. Family is all we have." "I heard about what you are doing to Marianne," another read. "Shame on you. You will regret this when they are gone." The smear campaign was spreading. They were painting a portrait of me across the extended family network, the cold, corporate witch who was hoarding millions while her elderly parents starved in the dark. They stripped away the context. They erased the $93,000. They left only the refusal. I did not reply to any of them. I archived the messages into the evidence folder, which was growing larger by the gigabyte, but digital threats are one thing, physical presence is another. On Wednesday night, 4 days after the confrontation, someone came to my building. I live in a secure building with a doorman, but the evening shift guy, Martinez, is older and sometimes assumes that if you look like you belong, you do. I was sitting on my couch, reading a contract, when I heard the heavy, deliberate knock on my door. I froze. I was not expecting a delivery. I had not ordered food. I walked softly to the door, my socks sliding on the hardwood. I looked through the peephole. The hallway light was dim, but I saw the figure. It was Uncle Ray. He was standing there, wearing a windbreaker that looked too tight, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He did not look like a man coming to apologize. He looked like a man sent to collect a debt. He knocked again, harder this time. 3 sharp raps that rattled the frame. "Addison," he said. His voice was muffled by the heavy fire door. "I know you are in there. Open the door. We need to talk face to face. Your dad is not feeling well. You need to hear this from me." I stood inches away from him, separated by 2 inches of wood and steel. I held my breath. He waited. He knocked one more time. "Don't be a coward, Addie," he muttered. I watched his shadow move under the gap at the bottom of the door. It stretched across my entryway floor, a dark intrusion into my sanctuary. I did not open the door. I did not call out. I stood there, trembling not with fear, but with a cold, vibrating rage, until he finally turned and walked away toward the elevators. That night, I pushed a heavy chair in front of the door. I knew the lock held, but I needed the visual confirmation that nothing could get in. The stress began to bleed into my work, at Haraway and Finch. Focus is the only currency that matters. You cannot miss a decimal point when you are valuing a company's assets. But on Thursday, I found myself staring at a spreadsheet for 20 minutes without seeing the numbers. I kept imagining my family as a swarm of insects, looking for a crack in the foundation. I was paranoid that they would call the office switchboard. I was terrified that my father would show up in the lobby in his cheap suit, demanding to see his daughter, making a scene that would shatter the professional veneer I had spent a decade polishing. I told my assistant, a sharp 22-year-old named Sarah, that I was dealing with a stalker situation. It was not a lie. I told her to screen all calls and that no one without an appointment was allowed past the reception desk. She looked at me with wide eyes and nodded. "I have got your back, Addison." It was a strange irony that I felt safer with a girl I paid $20 an hour than I did with the people who shared my DNA. Then came the letter. It arrived on Saturday. It was not a regular envelope. It was a rigid cardboard mailer from the United States Postal Service. Certified mail, restricted delivery. I had to sign for it. The mail carrier looked bored, but my hand shook as I scribbled my signature on the electronic pad. I took the envelope into the kitchen and set it on the island. The return address was a post office box in Delaware, labeled Card Services Division, Security Fraud Department. My heart started a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. I tore the tab and slid the contents out. It was a stack of paperwork. The cover letter was printed on red-bordered paper. Urgent verification request / account irregularities. I scanned the letter. Dear Ms. Bishop, we are writing to verify recent activity on the commercial line of credit ending in 4492. A request for a credit limit increase to $50,000 was submitted on Tuesday, along with a change of address request. Due to discrepancies in the income verification documents, we have placed a temporary hold on this transaction pending your confirmation. I frowned. Commercial line of credit. I did not have a commercial line of credit. I turned the page to look at the application summary attached to the letter. Applicant Addison J. Bishop, co-applicant. Bishop Renewal Outreach. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Bishop Renewal Outreach. B-E-R-O. The mysterious $99 membership fee on my father's card. It wasn't a networking group. It wasn't a club. It was a business entity. And apparently, I was an officer of that business. I read further down the application. It claimed that Bishop Renewal Outreach was a consulting and asset management firm. It claimed revenue of $150,000 a year. And at the bottom of the page, above the line marked Guarantor Signature, was my name. It was written in blue ink. It had the loops and the slant of my handwriting. It was a good attempt. It looked like my signature, but slightly hesitant. It looked like the signature of someone who had spent hours tracing my name from old checks or birthday cards, practicing the curve of the A and the sharp cross of the T. I looked at the date on the application. It was submitted 3 days ago, Wednesday, the day after the video call, while my mother was sending me texts about her labor pains, while Brielle was sending voice notes about starvation. Someone my father, or maybe Aunt Tessa, or perhaps the whole committee had been filling out a loan application in my name. They had tried to open a $50,000 line of credit using my credit history, my social security number, and a forged signature. They realized I had cut the cash flow, so they had decided to go straight to the source. They were not just trying to guilt me into giving them money anymore. They were trying to steal it. This was not family drama. This was a felony. I stood there in the quiet of my kitchen, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing wave of sadness that usually accompanied these betrayals. I waited for the part of me that was a daughter to break down and mourn the loss of her parents. But the tears did not come. My eyes were dry. My breathing was steady. The daughter in me had finally died, suffocated by the weight of the evidence on the counter. In her place stood the fixer, but I was no longer fixing their problems. I was fixing the leak in my own hull. I walked to my desk. I did not pick up the phone to call them. I did not scream into the void. I took out a fresh yellow legal pad and a black pen. I sat down and wrote a header at the top of the page. It did not say, reasons why they did this. It did not say, things to say to Mom. It said, counter moves. I looked at the forged signature one last time. It was an insult. It was a clumsy, desperate attempt to enslave me to their debt for another 10 years. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. If you want to play federal crimes, let us play federal crimes. I uncapped the pen and started writing. Step 1. Freeze all 3 credit bureaus. Step 2. File a police report for identity theft. Step 3. Contact the fraud department listed on this letter. Step 4. Hire an attorney who specializes in family financial fraud. I wrote until the page was full. I wrote until the sun went down. And for the first time in a week, I was not afraid. I was not paralyzed. I was mobilized. They had made a fatal error. They thought they were dealing with Addison the daughter, who could be manipulated by guilt. They forgot they were dealing with Addison the consultant, who dismantled failing organizations for a living and Bishop Renewal Outreach was about to go out of business. Monday morning did not begin with coffee. It began with digital warfare. I treated the situation exactly like a hostile corporate takeover, because that is what it was. My identity was the asset, and my family was the raiding party. I sat at my desk at 7 in the morning, 2 hours before I was due at Haraway and Finch, and I executed the list I had written on the yellow legal pad. Step 1 was the credit freeze. I logged into Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. I moved with a speed that surprised me. Click, verify. Freeze, click, verify. Freeze. It was a lockdown. I was erecting an invisible electric fence around my social security number. Step 2 was the passwords. This was the most painful part, not because it was difficult, but because it forced me to confront the intimacy of the theft. My security questions were standard. What was the name of your first pet? What is your mother's maiden name? What street did you grow up on? These were not secrets. These were dinner table conversations. These were the fundamental bricks of our shared history. My family did not need to hack me. They just needed to remember me. I changed everything. I used a random password generator to create strings of 40 characters that looked like hieroglyphics. I changed the security questions to lies that only I would know. Question: what is your mother's maiden name? Answer: Titanium. Question: what was the name of your first pet? Answer: liquidation. I was rewriting my history into a code they could not decipher. By 9 in the morning, I was walking into the 19th precinct. The station smelled of stale floor wax and old coffee. It was not dramatic. It was bureaucratic. I waited in line behind a man reporting a stolen bicycle and a woman who looked like she had been crying for 3 days. When I finally sat down at the desk of Detective Miller, I did not cry. I laid out the certified letter, the copy of the fraudulent application, and a timeline of the events. Detective Miller was a heavy-set man with tired eyes and a tie that had seen better decades. He looked at the paperwork, then at me. "This is a business loan application," he said, tapping the paper with a thick finger. "Bishop Renewal Outreach. You are listed as the guarantor." "I did not sign that," I said. "I have never heard of that company. That is my name. That is my social security number. And that is a very good forgery of my signature. But I did not sign it." He looked at the co-applicant field. "And the other names associated with this entity: Gordon Bishop, Marianne Bishop." "My parents," I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. He stopped writing. He looked up at me, and his expression softened. It was the look of a man who had seen this movie 1,000 times and hated the ending. "Ms. Bishop," he said quietly, "I am going to take this report. We will generate a case number. But I need you to be prepared. Identity theft is usually strangers in a basement in another country. But when it is this detailed, when they have the old addresses and the exact employment history." He paused, then sighed. "Family financial fraud happens more than you think. It is actually the most common type of elder abuse, but it goes the other way too. Parents taking from children. Siblings taking from siblings. They tell themselves they are just borrowing it. They tell themselves it is family money, so it belongs to everyone. It is not borrowing," I said, my voice cold. "It is $99 a month for a membership fee to a fake company, followed by a $50,000 loan application." He nodded. "I know. I am just telling you what we see. We will investigate, but you need to understand that if we pursue this, and if the district attorney picks it up, your parents could be facing felony charges, wire fraud, identity theft, forgery. Are you willing to go that far?" I looked at the handcuffs hanging on the back of his chair. I thought about my father in a cell. I thought about my mother in a prison jumpsuit. Then I thought about the text message: "We think it is best if you step away." "I am willing to go wherever the truth goes, Detective," I said. "File the report." I left the station with a case number on a small white card. I felt sick, but I also felt solid. I was no longer a participant in their delusion. I was a witness for the prosecution. The real blow came an hour later. When I finally got through to the fraud investigator at the bank that had issued the credit application, his name was Mr. Henderson, and he sounded like he worked in a room with no windows. He was efficient, clipped, and terrifyingly thorough. "Ms. Bishop, we flagged the application because of the income discrepancy," he said. "But upon review, we noticed something else. The application package included a scanned copy of your driver's license. The front and the back. It was a high-resolution color scan." I stopped walking. I was on the sidewalk, surrounded by the lunchtime rush of the city, but the world went silent. My driver's license. I kept my physical license in my wallet. I never let it out of my sight. How did they have a scan, then? The memory hit me. It was a physical blow to the chest. 4 years ago. We were on a family vacation, the last one we ever took. A weekend at a lake house that I, of course, had paid for. My father had been worried about emergencies. He was going through a phase where he was obsessed with digital preparedness. "We should have a shared folder," he had said, "for the family, passports, licenses, insurance cards, in case anything happens to any of us. The others can access it." I had thought it was responsible. I had thought it was sweet. I scanned my license. I scanned my passport. I uploaded them to the Bishop family Dropbox. I had forgotten about that folder. I had not looked at it in 3 years. But they had not forgotten. They had been sitting on a digital copy of my identity for years, waiting for a rainy day, and when I cut off the cash, they decided it was pouring. "Ms. Bishop," Mr. Henderson asked, "are you still there?" "I am here," I whispered. "I know how they got it. It was a shared cloud folder." "I see," he said. "Well, there is more. We flagged a second attempt this morning." My grip tightened on the phone. "A second attempt?" "Yes. About 2 hours ago, a supplemental document was uploaded to the application portal. It was a utility bill in your name, seemingly to prove your address. It was a fake, Ms. Bishop, a Photoshop job. But the metadata on the upload gave us an IP address." "Where?" I asked. "It traces back to a residential connection in Cedar Hollow, New Jersey." Cedar Hollow, my parents' town. "But, Mr. Henderson continued, "the device signature was not a desktop computer. It was a tablet, specifically, an iPad Pro. My father did not own an iPad. My mother used a Kindle Fire that I bought her 3 Christmases ago. Brielle was an Apple user, but she was currently finding herself in her condo 40 minutes away from Cedar Hollow. Who had an iPad Pro? Aunt Tessa." I saw the image in my mind immediately. Aunt Tessa, sitting at my parents' kitchen table, sipping coffee, tapping away on her expensive tablet. Aunt Tessa, who worked around finances. I had always been vague on what Tessa actually did. She called herself a financial coordinator for a medical billing company. She knew the codes. She knew the systems. She knew how to fill out forms so they didn't get rejected. I had always thought she was just a loudmouth who encouraged their entitlement. I realize now that she was the architect. My parents were desperate and clumsy. Tessa was the professional. She was the one who knew how to set up an LLC. She was the one who knew that a consulting firm looked better on a loan application than a personal request. She was the one guiding their hands. "Block it," I told Mr. Henderson. "Block everything, and send me the IP logs. I need them for the police report." "Already done," he said. I hung up. I stood on the corner of 5th Avenue and 23rd Street, and I felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. They were not just trying to survive. They were conspiring. They were holding strategy meetings. They were editing documents. This took time. This took effort. This was premeditated. I needed to know. I needed them to know that I knew. I did not call. I did not want to hear their voices. I did not want to hear the gaslighting or the tears. I opened my text thread with my father. I typed 3 sentences. "I have filed a police report for identity theft regarding the Bishop Renewal Outreach loan application. I have the IP logs linking the upload to the house. I know Tessa is helping you." I stared at the words. They were the nuclear option. Once I sent this, There was no going back to Thanksgiving dinner. There was no going back to clearing the air. This was an indictment. I hit send. I watched the delivered status appear. I waited. 1 minute passed, then 2. The 3 dots appeared. They waved for a long time, appearing and disappearing, as if he were typing and deleting, typing and deleting. Finally, the message came through. It was not a denial. It was not an apology. It was not, "What are you talking about?" It was one line. "Don't do this to your mother." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. "Don't do this to your mother." He didn't say we didn't do it. He admitted it by shifting the consequences onto her health. He was using her fragility as a shield to protect them from their own felony. He was telling me that if I pursued this, if I defended myself, I would be the one killing her. It was the ultimate manipulation. It was the final card in the deck, and it did not work. I looked at the phone and realized the game had changed fundamentally. They were not asking anymore. They were not begging. They were trying to take. They believed they had a right to my life, and if I wouldn't give it to them, they would carve it out of me. I put the phone in my pocket. I walked 2 blocks to a building I had passed 1,000 times but never entered. It was a high-end law firm, but not the corporate kind I dealt with. This was a firm that handled family law and estate litigation. I walked to the reception desk. "I need to speak to an attorney," I said to the receptionist. "I need someone who specializes in financial fraud within families, and I need someone who is not interested in mediation." She looked at my face. She must have seen the look in my eyes, the look of someone who has just survived a shipwreck and is done swimming. "I think you want Elena Rostova," she said. "She is available." I hired her an hour later. I sat in her office, which smelled of leather and expensive tea, and I signed the retainer agreement. It cost $5,000. It was the best money I had spent in 5 years. "We are going to send a cease and desist," Elena said, her voice sharp and metallic. "We are going to notify them of the fraud investigation. We are going to make it very clear that any further use of your identity will result in immediate prosecution. We are building a wall. Addison, a 10-foot steel wall." "Good," I said. "Put barbed wire on top of it." I walked out of her office into the late afternoon sun. The city looked different. It looked sharper. I had always thought that love meant having no boundaries. I thought love meant saying yes until you had nothing left to give. I realize now that I was wrong. Love isn't supposed to require a police report. Love isn't supposed to require a credit freeze. Love isn't supposed to make you feel like you are being hunted. I had lost my family. But as I walked toward the subway, I touched the folder in my bag containing the police report and the retainer agreement, and I realized I had finally found myself. The email from Human Resources arrived on Tuesday at 10:15 in the morning. It did not have a frantic subject line. It was terrifyingly mundane. "Meeting request regarding compliance inquiry in my industry." The word compliance is a loaded weapon. At Haraway and Finch, we manage assets for companies that are bleeding out. We handle sensitive data, trade secrets, and millions of dollars in liquidity. A compliance inquiry is not a casual chat. It is a prelude to an execution. I walked into the office of Elias Vance, the vice president of HR. The room was glass-walled, soundproofed, and cold. Elias was a man I had known for 6 years, a man who had attended the holiday party I organized, a man who knew I took my coffee black. Today, he did not offer me coffee. He pointed to the chair opposite his desk. "Addison," he said, folding his hands over a file folder. "We received a formal complaint through our ethics hotline this morning. Given the nature of our work and the fiduciary responsibilities you hold, we have to investigate every claim immediately." "What is the claim?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my hands were gripping the armrests of the chair so hard my knuckles were white. Elias slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a transcript of a digital submission. "The complaint alleges that you are engaging in financial misconduct," Elias said, his eyes watching my face for a reaction. "Specifically, it alleges that you have, quote, Embezzled funds from elderly family members to cover personal debts, and that you are currently financially unstable and a risk to client assets. It also claims you are being investigated by the police for fraud. The room spun. It wasn't a fast spin. It was a slow, sickening rotation. They had called my job. My mother, or my father, or Tessa. It didn't matter which head of the Hydra had done it, had decided that if they couldn't control my money, they would ensure I didn't have any to control. They were trying to nuke my career. They knew that in high-stakes consulting, a reputation for financial instability was a death sentence. Embezzled, I repeated. From whom my father, who has been unemployed for 5 years. My mother, who hasn't worked since 1998. The source is anonymous, Elias said. But the detail regarding the police investigation, is that true? Addison? Is there a police report? Yes, I said. There is? Elias leaned back, his face closing off. He was already calculating the liability. He was already drafting my termination letter in his head. But I am not the suspect. Elias, I continued, my voice sharp. I am the victim. I pulled out my phone. I did not ask for permission. I opened my banking app and the email from the detective. I filed a report for identity theft on Saturday, I said, turning the phone so he could see. Family members used my information to open fraudulent credit lines because I stopped supporting them voluntarily. The police report is here. Case number 2944 Alpha. I scrolled to the bank transfer history. And regarding the embezzlement, I said, finding the anger was actually helping me focus. Here is the transaction log for the last 12 months. You can see the direction of the cash flow. It is all outbound, from me to them. Rent, medical bills, utilities. If I am embezzling, I am the worst criminal in history because I am stealing from myself and giving it away. Elias looked at the screen. He looked at the police report, which clearly listed me as the complaining witness. The complaint said you stole family funds, Elias murmured, reading the paper again. I closed a bank account that I owned, I said, an account I funded with my salary from this firm. They are angry because the faucet turned off. This is retaliation. Elias, it is a smear campaign designed to pressure me into reopening the cash flow. I pulled up the text message from the group chat, the one from the cold open. Read this, I said. 10 days ago, we think it is best if you step away. They initiated the break. Does that look like the behavior of people who are being robbed, or does it look like people playing a game? Elias read the text. He looked back at the bank statements. He exhaled, a long, slow breath that deflated the tension in the room. Okay, he said. Okay, I see it. He slid the complaint into a shredder bin. I have to document that we had this conversation, he said. But your records are clear. I am sorry. Addison, this looks incredibly messy. It is not messy, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. It is targeted. I walked back to my desk, but I could feel the eyes of the office on me. I knew Elias wouldn't talk, but the feeling of safety was gone. My office was no longer a fortress. They had breached the perimeter. I called Elena, my attorney, from the stairwell. They contacted my HR department, I told her. They tried to get me fired. That is defamation per se, Elena said, her voice dropping into a register I like to call shark mode. Attacking your professional reputation with false claims of criminal conduct. We are done being polite. I am sending the letters today. Send them to everyone, I said. My parents, Brielle, Tessa, Uncle Ray, if they have a last name Bishop. I want them to receive a cease and desist on legal letterhead by tomorrow morning. Tell them that if they contact my employer again, we will file for immediate injunctive relief and sue for damages. I am on it, Elena said. But Addison, this escalation, it suggests they are panicking. People do not try to blow up the golden goose unless they think the goose is already gone. Why are they so desperate right now? You said the monthly transfer was $4,500. That is a lot. But is it enough to risk prison for— Her question hung in the air. Why now? Why was the reaction so nuclear? Why the fraud? The identity theft? The attempt to destroy my career? It felt disproportionate. It felt like I was missing a variable in the equation. I went home early. I couldn't focus on the spreadsheets. When I entered my apartment building, I checked my mailbox. It was empty. It had been empty yesterday, too. And the day before, I stopped. I get mail. I get trade magazines, credit card offers, bills that I haven't switched to paperless yet. I never go 3 days with zero mail. A cold prickle of suspicion walked up my spine. I went back out the door and walked 4 blocks to the local post office branch. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. The line was short. I walked up to the clerk, a woman named Mrs. Gable, who knew me because I mailed certified contracts for work often. Mrs. Gable, I haven't received mail in 3 days, I said. Is there a hold on my address? She typed my address into her terminal. She frowned. She adjusted her glasses and typed again. Not a hold. Honey, she said. A change of address. My stomach dropped. A permanent forward, she read from the screen. Effective last Monday, all mail for Addison Bishop is being forwarded to a P.O. box in Cedar Hollow, New Jersey. Cedar Hollow. I did not authorize that, I said. Who signed the request? It was an online request, she said. Verified with a credit card. A credit card. Probably one of the cards I had paid off for them years ago where they still had the number saved. Cancel it, I said. Cancel it immediately. And Mrs. Gable, can you tell me, was anything forwarded? Is there anything in the system? She tapped a few keys. It looks like the carrier caught it late today because the system was flagging the signature match. There is a bundle here that was set to go out to the forwarding address tomorrow. Do you want it? Yes, I said. She went to the back. She returned with a stack of envelopes bound by a rubber band. I took them. My hands were shaking. I walked to a counter in the lobby and sorted through them. Junk mail, a flyer for a pizza place, a bank statement, and then a thick cream-colored envelope. The return address was Sterling, Holt, and Associates, Attorneys at Law. It was stamped confidential. I tore it open. Dear Ms. Bishop, we are writing to you regarding the estate of Eleanor Bishop, your late grandmother, as the executor of the estate has failed to provide current contact information for all beneficiaries. We have utilized a tracing service to locate you. Grandma Eleanor, my father's mother, she had died 2 months ago. I had gone to the funeral. I had paid for the flowers. I had stood next to my father while he cried. I remembered the funeral vividly. My father had told me, there is no will. Addie, she died with nothing, just debts. I am handling it all. I read the next paragraph of the letter. Pursuant to the last will and testament of Eleanor Bishop, you are named as the primary beneficiary of the Bishop Family Trust, which includes the deed to the property at 42 Oak Lane and the residual financial assets. Valued at approximately $250,000, the trust stipulates that these assets bypass the direct generation your father, Gordon Bishop, and pass directly to the grandchild, Addison Bishop. I stopped breathing. $250,000 and a house. Grandma Eleanor had left everything to me. She knew. Even in her dementia, even in her old age, she had known who her son was. She had known that if she left it to Gordon, it would disappear into bad investments and consulting fees. She had skipped a generation to protect the legacy. I read on. We have attempted to contact you multiple times regarding the disbursement. Your father, Mr. Gordon Bishop, has indicated that you are currently unreachable and stepping away from family matters due to a mental health crisis, and he has petitioned to be named the interim trustee to manage these assets on your behalf. The world snapped into focus. It was a sharp, brutal clarity that hurt my eyes. The timeline, it all fit. The step-away text. It wasn't about Brielle needing space. It wasn't about my attitude. They needed me unreachable. They needed a paper trail showing that I had stepped away from the family so they could show it to this law firm. They needed to isolate me. cut off my communication, and rewrote my mail so I would never see this letter. They wanted me to disappear so they could intercept the inheritance. That was why they panicked when I closed the accounts. Not just because they lost the monthly allowance, but because they needed me to remain pliable and ignorant until they could get their hands on the trust. That was why they tried to ruin me at work. If I was fired, if I was financially unstable, it would bolster their claim that I was unfit to manage the trust and that my father should take control. It was a conspiracy, a literal conspiracy. They had been plotting this since the day Grandma died. The inciting break, the group text, the silence, it was all a smokescreen. I looked at the letter in my hand. It was heavy. It was the weight of $250,000. But it was also the weight of the final, absolute betrayal. They weren't just parasites. They were predators. I took out my phone. I took a picture of the letter and emailed it to Elena. Then I called her. "Do not send the cease and desist letters," I said. "Why?" Elena asked, confused. "I thought you wanted to shut them down." "I changed my mind," I said. "A cease and desist is a warning. I don't want to warn them anymore." I looked at the post office lobby, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. I found out why they did it. Elena, I found the motive. My grandmother left me everything. They tried to steal my inheritance. There was a silence on the line. Then, I heard the sound of Elena typing furiously. "Okay," she said. "That changes the venue. This isn't just civil fraud anymore. This is probate fraud. This is serious. I want a meeting," I said. "I want to finish this, not on a screen, in person." "Addison," Elena warned. "That is dangerous." "No," I said. "It is a trap, but this time, I am the one setting it." I walked out of the post office. The evening air was cool. I clutched the envelope to my chest. They wanted me to step away. They wanted me to be a ghost. Well, they were about to learn that ghosts are the ones who do the haunting. The week leading up to the final confrontation was not loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. The kind of silence that happens in a forest right before a predator snaps a twig. I was no longer operating on adrenaline. Adrenaline is for flight. I was operating on cortisol and cold. Hard data. I was digging in. I spent my mornings in the conference room of Elena Rostova's law firm. We had turned the space into a command center. The mahogany table was covered in stacks of paper bank statements, IP logs, credit reports, and the crown jewel, the affidavit from the post office regarding the mail fraud. We were not just building a defense, we were building a trap. "We need to link the intent to the action," Elena said, pacing the room in her heels. "We have the forgery on the loan. We have the rerouting of the mail. But we need to prove that they knew exactly what they were doing. We need to prove this wasn't just Gordon panic-clicking on a website. That proof came from Mr. Henderson at the bank. We had him on speakerphone on Tuesday afternoon." His voice was tinny but clear, cutting through the heavy air of the law office. "Ms. Bishop, I have finished the forensic review of the loan application packet," Henderson said, "and I have found something distinctive." "Distinctive how?" I asked, leaning over the speaker. "Usually when we see family fraud. It is messy," Henderson explained. "It is sloppy, numbers don't match, fields are left blank. But this application, it was perfect. The debt-to-income ratios were calculated to the second decimal point to maximize the approval odds. The industry codes used for Bishop renewal outreach were obscure. Specific codes that bypassed our automated high-risk filters. Only someone who works in medical billing or commercial finance would know those codes exist." I looked at Elena. She raised an eyebrow. "Tessa," I whispered. "Furthermore," Henderson continued, "the supporting documents, the profit and loss statements, were not just typed up in Word. They were generated using a specific enterprise software called FinSys. It is expensive software, licensed usually to mid-sized firms." "Does the metadata show the license holder?" Elena asked sharply. "It does," Henderson said. "The software is licensed to Tri-State Medical Billing Solutions. That is the employer of a Mrs. Tessa Bishop. The smoking gun didn't just smoke. It was on fire. Tessa hadn't just encouraged them, she had used her employer's resources, her professional software, and her specialized knowledge to craft a fraudulent identity for me. She had engineered a $50,000 heist using my credit score as the getaway car. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said. "Please send that report over immediately." When the line clicked dead, I sat back in the leather chair. I felt a strange sense of validation. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid, I was the target of a professional operation. "We have them," Elena said, tapping her pen on the table. "With this, we can prove conspiracy, we can prove premeditation, but Addison, if we take this to the police now, they will arrest them. Is that what you want? Or do you want the leverage?" "I want the trust," I said. "I want my grandmother's legacy secured, and I want them to look me in the eye when they realize they lost." To get there, I needed to understand the emotional landscape. I needed to know how long they had been planning this. That night, I did something masochistic. I opened the Bishop family folder on my cloud drive, not the shared one, but my personal archive. I had 5 years of voicemails saved. I usually transferred them there when my phone storage got full. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and started listening. I listened to birthday wishes from 3 years ago. I listened to Christmas greetings. I listened to the seemingly innocent requests for money. Then I found it. It was a voicemail from 2 years ago. It was from a family barbecue I hadn't attended because I was working. My phone must have been in my pocket or on a table, and it had accidentally recorded a snippet of conversation before cutting off. Or maybe someone had pocket-dialed me. The audio was muffled, the sound of wind and distant laughter. But then, voices cut through. "She is locking it down tight, Gordon," Tessa's voice said. She sounded loose, maybe a glass of wine deep. "She is getting smarter about the receipts." "She is just stingy," my father's voice replied. "She forgets who put her in that fancy school." "Don't worry," Tessa laughed. It was a low, throaty sound. "We will get access one way or another. The system always has a back door if you know where to push. You just have to wait for the right moment to pick the lock. I just need enough to get the business going," Dad said. "Then I will pay her back. She won't even know it was gone." "She doesn't need to know," Tessa said. "What she doesn't know won't hurt her. We are just correcting the balance." I froze the audio. Correcting the balance. That was their internal logic. They didn't see it as theft. They saw my money as a family asset that had been unfairly allocated to me. In their minds, they were just redistributing the wealth to its rightful owners. I sat in the dark of my apartment, the ghost of Tessa's laughter ringing in my ears. They had been talking about robbing me for 2 years. Every hug, every "we love you," every thank you note, it was all covering fire for the eventual extraction. Then, my phone buzzed. It was Brielle. I hadn't blocked her. Elena had advised me to keep the channels open to gather evidence, but not to engage. It was a voice note. I hesitated, then pressed play. "Addie," Brielle's voice was soft. It was the voice she used when we were kids, and she had broken something. "I am sorry about the texts the other day. I was scared. I am really scared. Addie, the landlord is saying if I don't have the deposit by Friday, the loft is gone, and I feel like my life is falling apart. I know you are mad at Mom and Dad. I get it. But please don't punish me for their drama. I just need this one thing. Just this one boost. And I promise I will figure it out. Please, we still need the money by Friday." I listened to it 3 times. The first part was an apology. It sounded genuine. It sounded like my little sister. But the ending, "We still need the money by Friday." The shift was subtle, but it was there. The pivot from "I am sorry" to "give me cash" was seamless. It was a script. I realized then that Brielle was a tragedy. She was a victim of my parents. Yes, they had raised her to be helpless, so she would never leave them, but she was also their accomplice. She was the bait. They knew I had a soft spot for her. They knew I would harden my heart against Gordon and Marianne, but they banked on me crumbling for Brielle. She was being used as the face of the need, while Tessa and my father did the dirty work in the background, but she was also an adult. She was 29 years old, and she was choosing to send the voice note. I did not reply. I saved the audio file to the folder marked Evidence, Brielle. I am not saving you this time. Brielle, I whispered. I am saving myself. The next morning, the pieces of the trap clicked into place. I received a secure email from the law firm handling my grandmother's estate, Sterling, Holt, and Associates. Ms. Bishop, it read, we have received a petition from your father, Gordon Bishop, claiming executorship due to your incapacity. However, per your attorney's instructions, we have halted that process. We are ready to move forward with the reading of the specific trust designation. We can schedule this for Friday at 2 p.m. Friday, the same day Brielle needed the money, the deadline they were all working toward. I called Elena. Book it, I said. Friday at 2, and tell the firm to invite the petitioners. Tell them that since my father claims to be representing my interests, he should be present for the disclosure of the assets. You want them there? Elena asked. It will be volatile. I want them all there, I said. My father, my mother, and tell them to bring their financial advisor, Tessa. Tell them it is a requirement for the asset transfer. They will think they won, Elena said, her voice sounding impressed. They will think you are capitulating and handing over the keys. Exactly, I said. Let them think they won until they sign the guest log. Once the invitation went out, the atmosphere shifted. The frantic texts from my family stopped. The aggressive voicemails ceased. They thought the silence meant submission. They thought the meeting at the estate lawyer's office was the moment I would sign over the trust to my father's stewardship and reopen the Bank of Addison. But as the day approached, they couldn't help themselves. They had to make sure the hook was set. On Thursday, my mother sent a text. We are so glad you are willing to talk. Honey, we can all have a fresh start after Friday. We forgive you for the stress you caused. We forgive you. The audacity was breathtaking. Then my father sent a message. I think it is best if we have a private talk before the meeting, just man to man, to make sure we are aligned on the strategy for the assets. I ignored it. Then, the night before the meeting, a message from a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakable. It was a text from Tessa. Don't embarrass the family tomorrow. Addison, people talk. You don't want your employer hearing more rumors about your stability. Just sign the papers and let Gordon handle the heavy lifting. It is for your own good. It was a threat wrapped in advice. She was reminding me that she could turn the heat back up on the HR complaint if I didn't comply. I didn't sleep that night. I wasn't tossing and turning with anxiety. I was awake with the cold. Electric buzz of preparation. I laid out my clothes for the meeting. I chose a navy blue suit. Sharp, tailored, armor-plated. I chose heels that clicked loudly on the floor. I wanted them to hear me coming. I packed my briefcase. In the main compartment, I placed the cease and desist letters. I placed the copy of the fraudulent loan application with the forged signature. I placed the IP logs tracing the crime to their kitchen table. I placed the report from the bank investigator linking the software to Tessa's employer. I placed the police report, stamped and verified. And in the front pocket, I placed the letter from Grandma Eleanor, the one they had tried to steal, the one that gave me the house and the money and the freedom they so desperately wanted to strip mine. I looked at myself in the mirror at 6 a.m. I looked tired. The circles under my eyes were real, but the eyes themselves were clear. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. I was done being the fixer. I was the plaintiff. I am ready, I said to the reflection. I picked up the briefcase. It felt heavy, like a weapon. I walked out of my apartment and locked the door. I didn't look back. The trap was set. The bait was laid, and they were walking right into it with their mouths wide open. The conference room at the law offices of Sterling, Holt, and Associates was designed to intimidate. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district, heavy oak paneling, and a table long enough to land a small aircraft on. I arrived exactly at 2 o'clock. I walked in with Elena Rostova on my right. My family was already there. They sat on the left side of the table, a united front of beige and denial. My father, Gordon, sat in the center, wearing his best suit, the one I had bought him for a job interview 3 years ago. My mother, Marianne, was next to him, clutching a tissue, ready to weep on command. Tessa was on the end, tapping away on her phone. Looking bored but watchful, Brielle was absent, likely kept away to maintain her plausible deniability, or perhaps she was just afraid to look me in the eye. They looked up when I entered. There was no warmth in their eyes. There was only the hungry expectation of people who believe they have won. "Addison," my father said, standing up and reaching out a hand as if to guide a confused invalid. "We are so glad you came. We were just telling Mr. Sterling that we are ready to take this burden off your shoulders. We know you have been struggling." I did not take his hand. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table, the position of authority, and sat down. "Sit down, Gordon," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a diamond cutter. He blinked, surprised by the tone, but he sat. Mr. Sterling, the estate attorney, looked from me to my father. He was an older man with wire-rimmed glasses and the patience of a saint. "Now that all parties are present," Mr. Sterling began, "we are here to discuss the disposition of the Bishop Family Trust, as established by the late Eleanor Bishop. Mr. Gordon Bishop has filed a petition claiming that the primary beneficiary, Addison Bishop, is mentally incapacitated and that he should be named the trustee." "It is for her own good," my mother interjected, her voice trembling perfectly. "She has been having episodes. She cut off contact with her family. She has been financially erratic. We just want to protect the estate." "Erratic," I repeated. I looked at Elena. She nodded. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "before we discuss the trust, I need to submit a few items into the record regarding my alleged incapacity and the protection my family is offering." I opened my briefcase. The sound of the latches clicking open was the only sound in the room. I took out the first stack of papers. "Timeline item 1, I said, sliding the paper across the mahogany. "A text message dated October 1st, sent by Marianne Bishop. Quote, 'We think it is best if you step away,' unquote. This establishes that the estrangement was initiated by them, not by a mental health crisis on my part." My father stiffened. "That was a private family matter." "Timeline item 2, I continued, sliding the next document. "Bank records from October 2nd, the closure of the Bishop Family Support Fund, a voluntary action taken by me to comply with the request to step away." "You abandoned us," my mother cried out, unable to help herself. "You left us with nothing." "Timeline item 3, I said, my voice getting colder. "A credit application submitted last Wednesday to First National Commercial Bank for a $50,000 line of credit in the name of Bishop Renewal Outreach." The room went deadly silent. Tessa stopped tapping on her phone. Her face went gray. "I did not sign this application," I said, looking directly at Tessa. "But someone did. Someone who practiced my signature. Someone who had access to my old addresses and my social security number." "This is a misunderstanding," my father stammered. That was just a draft. We were going to ask you about it." "Then why did you upload a forged utility bill from an IP address in Cedar Hollow?" I asked. "And why was the application generated using Finsys Enterprise software?" I slid the report from the bank investigator across the table. It landed in front of Tessa. "This report confirms that the software license belongs to Tri-State Medical Billing Solutions," I said. "Your employer, Tessa." Tessa looked at the paper. She did not touch it. She looked like she wanted to vomit. "That is a felony," Elena said, her voice sharp and professional. "Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit bank fraud. We have the logs. We have the timestamps. We have the device ID." My mother started to cry. But it wasn't the soft, sympathetic crying she used to get money. It was the ugly, jagged sobbing of someone who realizes the walls are closing in. "We were just trying to survive," she wailed. "We needed the money. You have so much. Addison, you have so much, and you wouldn't help. Why are you doing this to us?" "I am not doing anything to you," I said. "I am presenting the facts." I reached into the briefcase for the final piece of paper. "And finally," I said, "Timeline item 4, the reason we are all here today." I held up the letter from Sterling. "Holt and Associates, the one regarding the inheritance." "You knew about this," I said to my father. "You knew Grandma Eleanor left the house and the money to me. You knew she skipped you because she knew you would spend it on consulting fees and gambling debts. So you tried to hide it." I slid the affidavit from the post office across the table. "You filed a fraudulent change of address form to reroute my mail to a P.O. box in New Jersey," I said. "You wanted to intercept this letter. You wanted to get yourself named trustee before I even knew the money existed. You wanted to steal my inheritance while I was stepping away." My father's face was a mask of ruin. He slumped in his chair, the bluster completely gone. He looked small. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who had spent his life waiting for a payday he hadn't earned. "She was my mother," he whispered. "It should have been mine. It is not fair." "Fair," I said. "You want to talk about fair? Fair is $93,000 of my own money keeping you afloat for 5 years. Fair is me working 60-hour weeks so you could play pretend. And this is how you repay me, by trying to steal my identity and my birthright. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. He looked at my family with unmasked disgust. "Mr. Bishop," the attorney said, "given the evidence of mail fraud and the attempt to interfere with the notification of the beneficiary, your petition for executorship is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, I am legally obligated to report this attempt to the probate court. And I," Elena added, "am preparing to file these police reports with the district attorney's office, unless—" She let the word hang there. My father looked up. Unless you sign this," Elena said. She pulled a document from her folder. It was a binding settlement agreement. "This states that you acknowledge the debt of $93,000 you owe to Addison Bishop, though we are writing it off as bad debt. It states that you will never contact her again. It states that you will never attempt to access her credit, her medical records, or her property again. And it states that if you violate this agreement, the police reports will be filed immediately, and we will press for the maximum sentence." "You want us to sign a confession?" Tessa hissed. "I want you to sign a restraining order disguised as a settlement," I said. "I want you out of my life, permanently." My mother looked at me. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Addison," she pleaded, "we are your family. You can't just erase us." I looked at them. I looked at the people who had raised me. I looked at the people who had taught me to tie my shoes and ride a bike. And I looked at the people who had tried to sell my future to pay for their mistakes. "I am not erasing you," I said. "I am just stepping away." One by one, they signed. My father's hand shook. My mother wept onto the page. Tessa signed with an angry slash of the pen. When it was done, Elena collected the papers. "The fraudulent account at the bank has been closed," I told them. "The flags on your credit profiles will remain for 7 years. You will be monitored. If you try to open a loan, if you try to get a credit card, the banks will look twice. That is not my doing. That is the consequence of your actions." I stood up. I picked up my briefcase. I walked to the door, then stopped. I turned back to look at them one last time. They sat there in the wreckage of their own greed, a tableau of defeat. "You said I abandoned you," I said quietly. The room was so still I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "I didn't abandon you," I said. "I stopped funding the version of you that only exists when I pay. If you want to be a family, figure out how to be one for free. But you will have to do it without me." I walked out. I walked out of the office, down the elevator, and into the street. The sun was shining. The air smelled of exhaust and roasted nuts and freedom. I breathed it in, It didn't cost a cent. 1 year later, my apartment is smaller now. I bought a place in a quiet neighborhood, a place with good light and no doorman. It is mine. The deed is in my name, and my name only. I go to therapy every Thursday. We talk about guilt. We talk about the phantom limb syndrome of losing a family. It hurts less than it used to. I have a savings account. It grows every month. I went to Italy last fall. I ate pasta and drank wine and didn't check my bank balance once. I still work hard, but I don't grind my teeth in my sleep anymore. I haven't heard from them. The agreement held. I heard through a friend of a friend that Brielle moved to Arizona and got a job as a waitress. I hope she's okay. I really do. But I don't send money to check. Grandma Eleanor's trust is invested. It sits there, a silent guardian, a reminder that someone in that family actually saw me. I am sitting on my balcony now, drinking coffee, watching the sunrise. It is quiet. It is peaceful. And I want to say this to you. If you are the stable one, if you are the fixer, if you are the one they call when the sky is falling, but never when the sun is shining, you are not selfish for stepping back. You are not cruel for closing the wallet. They will tell you that you are changing. They will tell you that you are cold. They will try to rewrite your history to make you the villain of their story. Let them. You are not abandoning them. You are choosing to live in the truth, not in the role they assigned you. You are choosing to be the protagonist of your own life. And trust me, the view from here is worth every single penny. Thank you so much for listening to Addison's story. It was a long journey from that first text message to the final signature, and I hope it gave you some strength if you are dealing with your own difficult boundaries. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from a quiet morning in London, a busy commute in New York, or maybe a late night in Sydney? Please leave a comment down below with your city and your thoughts on how Addison handled her family. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice and reclaiming your life, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button to help us grow, and smash the hype button so this story can reach even more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next video.